Now we will have our second lecturer, Emmanuel Madrid. He's a master in assessment catastrophe by the University Miguel Hernández. He is a technical engineer in topography by the Polytechnic University of Valencia. He works in the gvSIG project since the beginning, where he has been working in testing product and organization. Now he works in the gvSIG association. He's going to speak about methodology for the monitoring of urban expansion at a worldwide level. If you were present last year, you will remember that there was a kind of video conference that was done by Joan Close and that has some relationship with that. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, everybody. It is a pleasure to be once again, and we are here for 10 years now, so that's very good news. And I'm going to speak about the participation of gvSIG together with New York University and UN Habitat. The presentation has co-authors 3 people from the New York University: Slomo Angel, Nicolas Galarza, and Planet Hanson Toy. At present, around 50% of the world population is now living in urban areas, and it is foreseen that in the next 30 years, many of those cities, especially in developing countries, double the number of inhabitants and multiply by 3 their surface. So it is vital for the future of those cities that this expansion takes place in an ordered way. Within this framework, NYU STEM urbanization project, which is a department of the business school of the University of New York, is promoting the project monitoring global urban expansion, having 2 main objectives: analyzing the urban expansion at a worldwide level, both at a quantitative and qualitative level, and in order to provide an empirical database to decision makers in charge of taking urban decisions. As Juan already told us last year, we were presenting here a project that was a work that was done to UN Habitat, which followed the same direction, compiling data about how cities are built in order to be able to improve in the future and make the right decisions in the future. So as I said, UN Habitat is highly concerned about this issue, and he has decided to support this project, which is promoted by the University of New York. So the role of gvSIG is to provide cartographic information. This project is based on a sample of 200 cities. Last year we were working with 30 cities. This is a much more ambitious project. With these 200 cities, they have been taken from a total of 4,043 cities, over 100,000 inhabitants that existed in 2010 and which are represented in this map. 200 are represented in this map. And this project has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the quantitative analysis of urban areas based on satellite images of intermediate resolution. That is an update, an extension of a previous work promoted by the same person, carried out in 2012, and that was an atlas trying to compile data which were merely quantitative regarding number of inhabitants, surface, degree of fragmentation of 120 cities. In this phase, this work is going to be extended to these 200 cities and is going to be updated in 2010. The previous one was reaching was covering 1990 2000. We're working with two expansion areas, one between 1990 and 2000, and the other between 2000 and 2010, based on high-resolution satellite images, and I'm going to show you this in this presentation. And finally, phase 3 is the qualitative image of the expansion areas by means of questionnaires which have been passed to owners and city servants. We want to relate this with the geometrical data that we extract, and we will like data about the degree of existence of urban development regulations and the degree of compliance with those standards. We have defined these metrics that you see. On the one hand, we have generic samples, and the other, those are related to the arteries of the city, because they have a special role that they play in the urban development of the city. We have the percentage devoted to streets that was collected in the project that we presented last year. Streets not only are connecting places, but also they allow human interaction. They allow people to relate to each other and to interact, and for that we need open spaces, and we also need the streets with wide enough, and that's why we have an average guide. And the size of the average block tell us about the connectivity of the cities, and we have a typical thing. And regarding the arteries, we have artery density, we have the kilometers per square kilometer, the percentage of space devoted to arteries, the average distance to the closest artery, and the percentage of floor which is less than 800 meters from an artery, which is, we are trying to find out which is the coverage of arteries in the cities. In this project, a series of soil or of land have been defined, residential and open space. And within residential, we have atomistic, which is a total absence of urban planning. Informal, there is a planning, but the blocks have occupied this in a disordered way, and there is a lack of equipment, of sidewalks and many other elements. So there is a basic planning, but then the land has been occupied in a disordered way without having finished previously the urban development. The informal is where we have planning, for instance, the cities in the developing world. There is planning, and blocks a lot have been occupied according to the urban standards, and then urban regulations, and then we have the residential projects, and the whole process from planning to building has been done according to a project, which are the typical residential projects or urban development projects. Regarding the non-residential land, here we have everything which is not residential. We have industrial areas, airports, stations, administrative building, malls, etc., parking lots, and so on. And then we have the land which is not built. Here we have the atomistic model. We see that the streets do not follow any standard. There is no grid. It has been occupied little by little, and with the only criterion of the people who have been occupied them. There is a disparity between blocks and lots. This is the highest level of informality. Here we have some planning, but after this moment, then the authorities then they did not do their role, and they have let that be occupied in a disordered way. We have different parcels. They are not sidewalks. Probably they are not healthcare equipment. And here we have the formal development. Here we have a planned urban. We have urban equipments, parks. The parcel have more or less the same size. And we have infrastructures, we have sidewalks, we have sewage, and we also have supply of utilities, and the highest level, which is that of the urban development projects, in which all plots are identical, because they have been designed within the framework of a global project. Regarding the arteries, they have to fulfill two basic requirements. Why are their arteries important? From the point of view of capacity and connectivity, the arteries should cover at least two circulation lanes per direction, and also they should be a part of a network covering the whole city. We may have wide streets, but if they are not connected to other wide streets, then we will not have a network, or perhaps they cannot. They have not capacity for all the traffic. Of course, the function are distributing the traffic throughout the whole city. They are of paramount importance for public transport, because buses and tramways cannot go through any street. They need wide streets, and they are a corridor for also for the utilities. Water, sewage, electricity, and so on. The study areas are belonging to the two decades, the 90s and the 2000 decades. In the right hand side, the upper right hand side, we have Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and in green we have represented the area for a study belonging to the expansion area between 1990 and 2000. And then we have the period between 2000 and 2010. They were obtained through comparison of satellite images, Landsat 3 meters resolution, and we see the typical pixels of 30 meters. The lower image corresponds to the expansion areas, but a closer scale. Some of the preliminary decisions that we make in order to do this study. Initially, we thought that we should do departure data as the departure of OpenStreetMap, and finally that was discarded, because in order to obtain the generic metrics, we needed a higher accuracy in the definition of the blocks and the street widths. Probably you know the cartography of OpenStreetMap, and we have the crossings of the streets. But this year we thought that as far as we needed a higher level of accuracy, we needed the specific width. So we have digitalized directly the border between block and street, and this is not abundant in the OpenStreetMap database. We have used that for the metrics of the arteries. another thing that we are discussing as far as we have to digitalize is the departure function, because digitalizing completely the expansion areas that would be too high cost. Then that gave rise to the use of sampling techniques, which will be given afterwards, and then the digitalization is done with the OpenStreetMaps. There are different editors. We are using gvSIG over Bing satellite image, and this is a very good tool. The obtention procedure of generic metrics, summarizing, is this: it has 4 items. First of all, samples are generated. That means the areas that we are going to digitalize. Secondly, we digitalize the blocks separating the block from the street space in each sample. Then we do procedures, and finally, whenever we have these metrics, we assess the variance of each one of the metrics if compared to the already calculated metrics, in order to assess when do we consider that the variance gets into the established limits. In this way, the time used is optimal, ensuring the representativity of the sample. How do we generate samples? Samples are generated by means of a Haltom sequence with a semi-randomized sequence. The difference with a pure randomized sample is that the purely randomized, they provide you concentration of samples in some places, while we had gaps in others. We are interested in having some level of randomization. So it should be randomized at a low level, but the expansion area should be more or less uniformly covered. We generate samples at 2 different densities. For big cities, we use 1 sample per square kilometers, and in small cities we use densities of 4 samples per square kilometer. The number of samples depends on how heterogeneous a city is, because that determines the variance, which is calculated for each sample. These are the samples generated for Addis Abeba. And a closer scale, the samples are circles, in fact, of 10 hectares, on which we're going to work later on. At a low level is randomized. The samples are randomized, but at a greater scale, we provide some uniformity in order to have the study area covered. About the digitalization, we can mention, as I said, that for each we have a circle of 10 hectares. These circles are presented on the Bing satellite image in gvSIG, and we digitalize all blocks which have an intersection with a circle. Additionally, for each block or even sub-blocks, because we can have some sub-blocks which have more than one type of floor inside, and these differences are divided if necessary. And also we take some samples about the facet width and the depth. This is a sample digitalized. We have the departure circle, which would be the departure sample, and we have digitalized all blocks which intersect with that circle. We would identify the types of land and we would take samples of the facade widths and the type of land. Regarding the geoprocessing, this is done automatically based on the input data by means of a script which is written in Python and executed from ArcGIS in order to have more freedom to choose the application we are going to use for this. The script provides the result, provide as a result the value of each matrix and the variance of each sample. And as soon as the variance gets into the limit previously established, no new samples are digitalized, as we said last year. Regarding the obtention of the arteries metrics, this is summarized in these 6 areas. First of all, the study area is defined, which is the gathering together of the study area from the previous expansion area, plus a buffer of 1 kilometer. The extraction.
Secondly, the main channels on OpenStreetMap are opened by using Overpass-Turbo, which includes a graphic interface for you to launch inquiries. In this case, we draw specifically street access whose type of highway, whose highway field is motorway, primary, secondary, or tertiary. Then a 1 kilometer mesh or grid is presented for you to work in an orderly manner. In point 4, identification of main roads on satellite images from Bing, gvSIG. So with the reference of the main axis or roads, we identify roads which are wider than 18 meters, which in turn connect or have junctions with other roads which are also as wide as those over 18 meters. Thus, we make sure there are junctions with adjacent streets. Basically, we rule out motorways or highways which obviously don't have junctions with ordinary streets in a city. This is very important because a road, an artery, needs to fulfill the role of catering for the public transport network. And obviously a highway cannot take the public transport network because you cannot reach, the motorway from a junction in a city. Number 5, digitalization. In this case, we draw the shape, the contour of the state covered or gone through these streets. And finally, we do the geoprocessing with a Python script, which gives us back the result of the metrics. This is the website I mentioned, Overpass-Turbo. You can see the map on the right-hand side, which shows us the extent, the geographic extent on which we can draw data from OpenStreetMap. And on the left-hand side, we have a little window where we can enter the script. And there is a wizard to create the scripts. And you can extract data from the OpenStreetMap database. This is the result of digitalizing these roads, particular crossroads, a junction in Colombia. In fact, in Colombia, we chose 4 cities for a pilot test. One of them is Valle de Pan in Colombia. This picture in the darker green patch shows the original study area, namely the junction of the 2 expansion areas. In a lighter green shade, we see the 1 kilometer buffer. The black dots are the samples analyzed for this area, and the red lines show the real roads already digitalized on the orthophoto. So basically we see this urban sprawl is not adequately covered by major roads because most of the area is far from being completed or accessed by roads. I will now share with you a few conclusions. This is one of the first urban studies which places the emphasis on expansion urban sprawl areas instead of on city centers. This is actually a distinctive feature of the project. The results of this study will help us determine empirically from a both quantitative and qualitative point of view how cities in the world have grown over the past 2 decades. It offers very valuable information to decision makers to try and implement measures for cities to grow in an orderly manner without affecting their citizens' life. It lays the foundations for future studies in any other research field. In actual fact, the representativeness of these 200 cities is very high, and therefore it can be used as a pattern for any other urban planning study. In fact, this set of cities includes relatively small cities of which we do not know much because they are usually excluded from research projects. Thank you. Are there any questions? Hello. Yeah, short question. It is clear then that analyzing all cities in the world is a mission impossible. That's why you set some criteria. But excluding small towns, by excluding small towns, aren't you disregarding a very important population element? Right. First of all, what is a small town? We're talking about towns with more than 100,000 inhabitants. If that's what you mean, under 100,000 inhabitants, yes, they were ruled out. I don't know why that was the limit, 100,000. I understand that under that population level, the towns would be relatively small. And obviously the representation power would not be that strong. But, well, actually that shouldn't be a problem because it could be done without sampling. If they're small, they could be fully digitalized. But I suppose you have to stake things, somewhere. As I showed in the conclusions, that is a positive feature in the study because usually studies are conducted on cities with more than 5 million people, really large cities, but this study actually goes down to 100,000 inhabitants, which is already quite an achievement. But I suppose the lower we go, the more towns could be included, but that would be really unattainable, and particularly the representation power of the sample would not be that strong. And yes, the criteria used for choosing the cities, cities like Barcelona or Valencia, are not included in the study. The sampling was based on levels, on strata. The world was divided into a number of geographical regions: Europe, Japan, North America, South America, Northern Africa, Southern Africa, Northern Africa together with the Middle East, then Central Asia, Southern Asia. So regions were staked, and we made sure the number of cities was similar in each region. And criteria number 2, the number of inhabitants, of course, to try and represent both large and small cities. And finally, the last criterion, sorry, I forgot. What was the last criterion? Yes, the number of cities in each country. In other words, or for instance, the United States, it has quite a lot of cities with more than 100 inhabitants, but we did our best in achieving maximum representation, including as many countries as possible. So in my view, representation is maximum. The representation power is really representative of the universe for us to be able to draw global conclusions. Are there any more questions? Good morning. I really enjoyed your presentation. We work as teachers. I am a teacher or a lecturer, geo-urban dimensions. So it's very interesting for me to hear about this, because the references or the bibliography is not very long. Now, about the sample, is it the same percentage for all regions? The same percentage of cities for each region? I don't have the figures with me. We did not participate in that decision, but yes, the goal was for representation to be maximum, taking into account the 3 criteria: the number of inhabitants, to represent as many countries as possible, than to represent all geographical areas. I'm unaware of the specifics, sorry. Sometimes in certain regions, population forecasts foresee a disorderly growth, particularly in developing countries. So I don't know if the sample was right for those cases. Yeah, the study has a comparative purpose as well, and obviously nothing is excluded or ruled out, because we also need to compare what happens when urban sprawl occurs orderly and what happens when that is not the case. So yes, of course, the goal was to attain maximum representation, including cities which witnessed disorderly growth trends. Yeah, it is a pilot test phase in 2015, and in early 2016 it will be further developed. It will, and we aim to submit it in the conference Habitat 3 in 2016 in summer. Thank you. I have a couple of comments. Both have to do with what you said already. You talked about the technicalities of the project, but at the beginning you mentioned non-technical aspects such as sociological aspects about transport, roads, etc. How did you combine in such a very technical piece of work all these other dimensions? That's question number 1. In other words, who did you cooperate with? And question number 2, or comment number 2, you said it's going to be published. Are you afraid that the publication of the results may ultimately lead to increases in land prices? It may have implications license-wise, surface-wise, particularly in regions like Africa, Yeah, question number 1 was about, cooperating with other institutions for socioeconomic aspects, I'm sorry to say I did not take part in that phase. As I said at the beginning, the study consisted of 3 phases. One to collect socio-economic information. Sorry, that's phase number 3, so I do not know who will cooperate in this respect. But yes, obviously the University of New York is involved, and the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in Massachusetts, which is a high stature institution, and as far as I know, the 3rd phase is being defined together with other top organizations worldwide. This is partly funded by the Habitat Conference and by a United Nations agency, so we will have first-hand information on social indicators. And question number 2, yes, will land prices go up? Is there a risk? Well, can't tell, but regardless of the situation, we should not be afraid. These results are not going to be kept away from people. We cannot hide results simply because there might be a potential risk for price increases, and in fact speculation in land prices should be prevented by legal systems. Thank you.